Hi, I'm Kani. I'm a project manager at 1990 Research Labs.
Hi, my name is Dharmesh Ba. I am the founder of 1990 Research Labs. We are a user research firm based out of Bangalore.
Hi, I'm Tanuj and I run a not-for-profit called People+AI.
Hi, I'm Vibhor. I drive network governance at Open Network for Digital Commerce.
With AI, we can see the possibility of that being greatly simplified and being greatly localized for India. I mean, the name of our not-for-profit is People+AI, which is, we try to put the people first, look at their problems, and then look at how technology can solve those problems. In fact, it's funny where I'm sitting in this sofa. On one side is Dharmesh, who gets down to that single user and talks to them individually, and we have Vibhor here who thinks at scale, right? Like, how do you bring commerce at scale and how do you do this thing?
Do we move the power back to the end nodes where they can decide what they want to do? They have access to information which helps them self-correct. They have access to information which can help them grow their own businesses, right? And things like what are people in your catchment area buying, right? Or what's not available in your catchment area which people are looking for but it's not available.
For 10, 15 lakhs at least, right? Like, I'm trying to give this company. And for the last 2 days, that has been hindered because an OTP won't deliver. I can't buy the car till I get this OTP.
So the dad has been running a brand, like a manufacturing brand. Now when the daughter has come, the dad has carved out like a separate space, put up a different brand and let her run the show, right? Now she uses social media a lot, where she's even like collaborating with the local celebrities, going to the fairs and collectively doing this. Just adding to that, this social media page that we're talking about does not have any entertainment. It's purely just marketing.
Yeah.
Red
Right.
grinders.
Yeah,
Yes.
Wet grinders, right? Purely wet grinders had hit like 1 million views.
From get ready with me to get dosa with me.
Something like that, right?
I'm excited for all the things that are left to be built. And with AI, how easier has it become to build them? And because of our DPIs and open networks, right? That if you do build the right thing, it will scale.
Last year, 1990 Research Labs and People+AI came together to conduct a study with small-scale retailers across India to uncover what are the potential opportunities for AI to intervene in a small business owner's life. So we went to 4 states and we spoke to around 25 small business owners, and we have compiled a list of 11 interesting opportunities that as an entrepreneur that you could address and you could build solutions for, right? So we have a interesting PDF to put, and we also have an interactive presentation where you will find anecdotes from the field with an interesting touch of AI. I highly recommend you to read and see both of them. The link for both of those report and the presentation will be given in the description. In today's conversation, we are going to pick up interesting aspects from that report and discuss deeper into it. Awesome. So why are we all here? So we are here to discuss an interesting research project that we did last year, where we went around across the country and we tried understanding what are some of the challenges of small businesses across India. But we have a lot of insights to dive deep into it. Before that, Tanuj, why don't you tell us why AI is important and specifically why AI for India?
I guess if you've not been living under a rock, you've heard of AI, and you hear recently, if you've tried talking to LLMs or using them, you'd probably be surprised at how far we've come and what is now possible. The way we think about this technology is that it is essential to bridge the gap. So far, technology that we've seen has been useful, but it usually starts in a way that it is applicable or useful only for, say, a certain elite population, and then it kind of slow grows affordable and becomes popular. I think with AI we're going to see a reverse, where there is a lot more utility of AI for people who've not yet gotten into digital and the technologies in the past. Because if you were already using Google search, right? And then now you go to Perplexity, etc., and search for an answer. Yes, it's better, but it's still internet web search. But let's suppose if you couldn't even use a cell phone, or if you had trouble, that cell phone may have been programmed, might as well in Chinese or Mandarin, right? Because you can't speak English, you can't speak the languages, or you're illiterate and you can't read or write. Accessing these technologies, accessing apps has been a very hard and steep learning curve. With AI, we can see the possibility of that being greatly simplified and being greatly localized for India. Hence, I'm very excited. I mean, the name of our not-for-profit is People+AI, which is, we try to put the people first, look at their problems, and then look at how technology can solve those problems. And in that context, we decided to collaborate with you to figure out, for the long MSME tail of India, what is their relationship with their technology? How do they think about what they could do and now can do, right? What they should be able to do with their technology as applies to the context of their business and their livelihood. And I think while there has been some digitization, we'll dive into this in the later sections, I'm sure. While there has been some digitization, once again, there's been a gap. It's not been fully customized and fully made for the population that it's meant to serve. And I'm very excited because small businesses are the heart of the economy, right? Nandan always says that it's not going to be that a few companies create 1 million jobs. So it will be a few million businesses creating 1 or 2 jobs each that will help the economy grow. And I think we're at that moment.
Yeah. So, for example, when we started discussing, we said over the last 10 years, the way we do things in our life has drastically changed, right? So, for example, we don't use SMS anymore. And if you're thinking of going to any place, you can't do without actually doing Google Maps. So a bunch of them have actually become a verb. Like I've been doing a bunch of research, and today when I go to a small tier 2, tier 3 towns, when I ask them, how do you send an image? They look like I'm asking like an alien question. Like, are you stupid? I'm sending it on WhatsApp. They don't even use the term WhatsApp anymore because it's become a part of their vocabulary. Now, when we started discussing, the one thing that I wanted to dive deep into is there is no equivalent app for small retailers which has changed their life drastically. There's been attempts and there's been like great amount of funding that was poured in, but nothing, in my opinion, drastically changed, like say 100x better their lives. And we wanted to see if AI had some potential towards that. And that's where I think the idea started, right? Do you have some thoughts around why do you think this AI world will help them, whereas the previous technology world did not?
That's an interesting question. I do think that my intuition of an answer is the following, right? That every tool simplifies some things, but complicates something else, right? Like if you have a car, for example, it takes you easier from A to B, but then there's maintenance, there's ownership, and if you get into insurance, if you have an accident, etc. So there are these trade-offs inherent in doing things a certain way and then doing things a different way with some tools or some technologies. I think a lot of the reason why we have not had adoption, right, is because software is actually rigid. It does what it says, right, before AI. If you have to make software at scale, how do you do that? How do you make something rigid work for a country as diverse as ours, right? There are various aspects of AI which I believe can solve that problem. Number one, you can do a lot of stuff on the fly, including generating UI, right? Like what is the right interface for this problem? You have to otherwise hard code. But now I think you can make UI on the fly with AI. We're seeing startups do that. Second, there is a very, very, at least I'm anthropomorphizing here, but like there is a very assistant, co-pilot, these are the words we started using, right? Because one of the things we've learned to do is create a tool that empathetically and patiently walks you through the process. It'll answer all your questions. Even when you have, as we classically have in India, a do-it-for-me model, as they call it, those people also have targets and, like something to achieve or so sales or something to cross-sell. And that full trust equation is not there. I think that will change. And I did talk about this personalization. Ultimately, if it's in your local language, if it's in a way that you can understand, that might open up people more to, engage with this technology. So I think that, and this is just the LLM sort of business that we're seeing right now. people are using the same underlying concept of AI, generative AI, which is throw more data and throw more compute at the problem, to also crack a whole bunch of other problems, right? Like in science, in protein folding, in visual LLMs, etc. So I think we've not even seen where this journey is going to go. And therefore, I'm very, very excited, right? I feel like a lot of problems in India, which had really bad trade offs for the users, will no longer have such bad trade offs.
Right. Just adding one point to that, right? It's also that I like the point where you said the technology was rigid and now it's fluid. I think that mental model is very interesting because earlier, okay, the small business owners were here, their understanding of the world or their understanding of technology was here, and probably technology expected them to leapfrog and say, "You come to my world and learn and do," which means that I have to put a lot more effort into learning the interface, learning the workflow, or even hire people. All of the maths cost to it without necessarily knowing what is the benefit that I'm going to get, right? Now, what we are literally saying is, hey, you be wherever you are. Probably we will integrate with your lives without necessarily you trying to put in a lot more effort, right? I think that's where it starts getting interesting. We will discuss more about it. Maybe, Kani, you can help us understand the entire world of MSMEs and then we'll dive slowly deep into it.
Yeah. So drawing on Tanuj's and like Dharmesh's point, what we also thought was like the synergy between like the very chaotic world of like MSMEs and the structure and sense making world of AI like has like a very much like a plethora of opportunities to open up. So setting a little bit of context from the macro lens, MSMEs contribute to around like 30% of the GDP, and it employs around 11.1 crore people with like around 6 crore small businesses all over India. So what we thought was, why don't we like go and explore certain of these businesses and try to understand their lives from a very close point, so that we get a sense of what are the human elements of this, right? Like it's always nice to study the statistics from a macro lens, but what do they think and feel like and everything. So as part of that study, we went around all over India, around 4 states and 8 cities, and talked to around like 13 types of businesses, ranging from groceries, puja shops, and footwear shops, retail, and everything. Now, I would like to take or call Dharmesh to tell us like what is like the outlook of small businesses, and probably just start introducing the insights from the report.
So I usually try to compare my world with the world what I'm trying to research, right? So almost across all the people that we spoke to, the 25 small businesses, one thing that was very clear is what we call a TAM, like the total addressable market, is just a couple of kilometers around their shop, right? Because in the e-commerce world, you're already thinking, hey, I can distribute across the country, distribute across the world. You're thinking big. They're not thinking big. It might sound like a simple thing, but what it translates is the total number of people that you could address is only your neighborhood, which means you can't be very specialized, right? So, for example, if a daughter walks into your shop, you need to convince her to next time bring her mom also to the shop, right? And they don't see them as a one-off customer, because unlike in an e-commerce store, where if a couple of customers get pissed off, I might have more people coming in because I can run ads, whatever. But here, if this store owner manages to piss off a couple of them, and that's going to spread like a wildfire, and that's going to be a deterrent to their business, right? So that single insight became like a baseline for everything else what we thought about, like the small businesses, right? The additional thing which we also thought, what is the motivation for them to start a small business, right? So almost all of them said, I wanted to have my own independence, right? Think about like some of us. And so we probably are coming from a graduation, post graduation. All of us would get a job. Like when we are thinking about an entrepreneurial journey, we are not saying I'm going to become an entrepreneur because I just want to cover my expenses at home, right? Because if I become an entrepreneur, I'm thinking I need to get a 100x upsell, uptick. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it, right? But when these folks, they would have already worked somewhere, probably under a manager and bad environment or whatever, they come out not to say that, I want to probably become like a unicorn founder. All they're thinking about is, can I come out, set up a business which will help me achieve or manage my household? That's it, right? If you even ask their goals,
The goals are not around wealth creation or even flaunting the wealth. It's all about, hey, I need to put food at the table. I need to sort of help my kids with education, get them married or send them to the college, all of it, right? And they just are looking at this as a business which will get them enough cash flow to sort of be there. Now, another aspect to it is also that this is my personal observation from what we have seen, right? There's a factor of age, right? As you get older, the older people that we spoke, they were already completed a bunch of these goals in their life, right? So, which means they already are set for, like, the daughter's wedding or the son's education, whichever it is, or they have bought in some home. So they are in the zone of being stable. So whenever we talk to other people, they say, there's a common narrative that, hey, they don't have enough aspiration. They don't want to grow. It's not like they don't want to grow. The goal of why they started the entrepreneurial journey or the business journey is already done. So we are probably looking at the wrong side of the people. But on the other hand, if you look at the younger side of people, they have the hunger, they have the aspiration, they will run much, much faster, right? So this is like the general outlook. But when you start thinking about, are there different categories of businesses within the ones we interviewed? Usually the regular categories of how do we divide small businesses are, hey, can we categorize them based on revenue? Can we categorize them based on what is the size of the shop, right? We said, no, we want to do it somewhere around the behavioral aspect of it. And that is why we observed three kinds of businesses. One is a curation business, where the business thrives primarily based on the shop owner's eye for detail, right? So, which could be a boutique store. But the boutique store actually wouldn't run if you remove the business owner, right? Unlike like a grocery store where some nuances you can build and somebody could be replaced, but the boutique store is solely dependent on the business owner. Same thing for a beauty parlor or like a salon or whatever it is, right? So they establish a business because somebody has appreciated them saying you are good at this, and they've decided I want to make a business out of it, right? And they go and scout for whatever these products or services, and they come back and they sell it to a set of people, and they have their own set of following. For example, we met a boutique store owner in Pratapgarh in UP. She was a Marwadi, and she said that most of the Marwadi women don't prefer silk from Surat, right? And they prefer from Kolkata or Jaipur. But all the shopkeepers predominantly procured from only Surat. And she knew that because, the touch and the feel of the fabric and the material is different. She, as an experiment, started procuring from Kolkata and Jaipur. Initially, she started as a homepreneur. She would invite all these women. How did she know? Because they have a community, they have a WhatsApp group. She starts posting there. This is pre-COVID or during COVID. She starts doing it as a small thing. Then she slowly gains confidence, has convinced her husband and father-in-law to say, hey, I want to do it on a slightly bigger scale. And they've given her a small space in their shop, and now she runs it on her own. Her only USP is, if you go to a market and if you see 10 saris, you will like one. But if you come to me, out of 10, you'll like 8, right? My assortment is not huge, but because of the quality and the design that I'm able to pick up, people are more interested in, coming here, right? So this is the types of curation business. Then comes the second kind of business, which is mostly aggregation business. Now, aggregation business thrives based on how many unique SKUs that you can procure and have access to all of them at one place, right? Kirana store is a great example. Pharmacy is a great example, right? Whereas where you say that, hey, in this area, in the next 1 kilometer, there's no grocery store. I'm just going to establish that, right? In my understanding, there is not much thought process that goes into it. So it's just about, okay, there is needs to be doing. For example, I see an apartment, new society coming in. Immediately, my thought is, okay, let me establish a Kirana store there, right? Then comes the third type of business, which is a monopoly business, which is very interesting even for us. It is the kind of business where the business owner has struck some deals with the distributors to say, your brand around 4 or 5 kilometers, I should be the only person who will sell it. Why are they doing it? Because they can escape competition. It is a very interesting thing, right? This one electrical store owner, again in Pratapgarh, told us they sell a lot of wires. Now, he had choice between selling a Havells wire and there was another brand, right? So if he starts selling only Havells wires, he said my customer is going to start comparing my product price with other people. But I just wanted to eliminate that. So he struck a deal with a distributor of another brand saying, I will give you so much sales for you. In return, you should only sell this brand to me. Right. So they struck a deal. So that becomes a hook for people to come to a store. And as they see the store, they start buying other stuff. Right. Even though we see them as categories, they can also be stores which is a combination of these two. Like, say, for example, a pharmacy would also have some FMCG products, or like a boutique would also have, like, some standard products and stuff. Right. But largely, next time when you see a store, you see them, observe them. Why do you think, what is the USP of the store? You'll be able to categorize them within one of these. Right. So this is like the ones that we discovered around the business outlook. Right. You folks have actually been working with small businesses, and you've seen them, some of the struggles or some of the challenges that they face. Vibhor, do you have some aspect that you would like to add with this?
No, great. I think if I look back at each of the three personas you spoke about, right? And if I look at that segment in general, right, there are three pillars around which the entire narrative of a small retailer or a medium-sized retailer hinges on, right? And that's true for any business. The weightages across those pillars may vary depending on which type of business they are. The first is, how do I get demand, right? Whether it's a hyper local business where, as you mentioned, the geographical spread is contained to a 2-3 kilometer radius, or it's a pan India business. How do I create demand is a challenge for people, right? And with the shift that's happening towards technology enabled businesses, obviously there is a bit of pain that the traditional businesses or the traditional brick and mortar businesses are facing. So how do we enhance the demand side of it is one pillar to be focused on. The second is assortment and inventory management, right? I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I was going through a report, which also comes out very clearly that, a small business, how do they manage the assortment? Because they only have that much of real estate.
Yeah.
They only had that much of working capital. And how do they manage a good assortment of products, which will sell is critical. A link to that is the inventory management of that, right? And obviously, in terms of the turnaround times that they have, in terms of the working capital management part of it that they have, what sort of stocks they should be keeping, which is adequate to take care of their customer needs. The third pillar, which needs to be solved for, is the pricing and the working capital, the more of the commercial side of things, right? How do I price my products so they're competitive? And today, the biggest challenge is the online world, right? That's the reality, face it or not, right? People do compare prices online in terms of what offers are available, what deals are available. And I think on occasions, the brick and mortar traditional companies are not able to, or merchants are not able to offer those sort of pricing, right? A link to that would be the entire working capital management. Now, obviously, in a business which is very unorganized, right? I do not have adequate information collaterals, right? Which can help me get credit, and therefore I typically rely on asset-based collaterals, right? Now that's again a big challenge for small businesses in terms of how do they provide those collaterals to manage their credit cycles and then working capital. So I think these three are typically the challenges that's even highlighted in the report, which any small business faces, right? Now, if you look at an initiative like ONDC, it focuses on solving all three of these challenges, right? And the interesting point which it looks at is, I think what even Tanuj mentioned, it does not say that I'm going to completely change the way you operate or the way you do business. But yes, in the way you do business, how can I assist you with some enablers which can help you achieve these three efficiencies from a business standpoint? So let's talk about each of them one by one, right? The first one you spoke about was a demand, right? Now, demand, obviously, one is my catchment area in terms of people who walk into my store. But is there also a demand sitting out there where I can have online orders coming from the same catchment area in the hyperlocal scenario, right? Now, a network like ONDC can enable for that, right? I think there's one initiative that we're working on, interesting initiative, where irrespective of the application of choice that the consumer walks in with, can I convert an offline order to an online order for a walk-in customer on the application of their choice or the platform of their choice, which helps in multiple ways. One, can I reflect or take advantage of the offers available online in terms of payment offers or any such offers while I'm a walk-in customer? So yes, the customer benefits because the customer gets offers online, but in a physical environment. The second is for a shopkeeper, it's creating his or her information collateral, which can be used for any sort of offers tomorrow, right? So if you look at it, such thing like the way you have a QR code for payment options today, the UPI QR codes, why can't I have a shop QR code which tells me, which has the entire catalog behind that QR code, and that can be scanned on any sort of demand generating application, as we call it, on the ONDC network. But yes, what it does, it does not mandate the customer to download a specific application. You are shopping on your favorite application. The seller or the merchant in this case receives data in terms of who my customer is, who is the transacting customer. The customer gets an offer in terms of online offers that are running. The merchant gets instant settlement in terms of the cash that he or she should be receiving. So it's a win-win for everyone. So if I look at this sort of an example, it does not disrupt the entire business model in terms of asking you to change the way you think or the way you work, but it enables a lot of levers which can drive more efficiency onto the network, right? So yes, one is the demand pillar. The same is the inventory and the assortment pillar, right? Now, when you're a network like ONDC, can the network give you insights in terms of what sells in that catchment area, right? So, for example, can there be an open data framework which tells that what are the preferences that consumers have in a particular catchment area or a particular geography, which helps the merchant to stock those products adequately, right? Now, in any shop that you go to, say a general trade shop, typically they would stock between 1,500 to 2,000 SKUs at max, right? That's the sort of max you'll find in a small to medium sized store. Now, it's important that you're stocking so much of inventory. How do you optimize the assortment out there in terms of what people are going to ask for? So again, the initiative helps you understand and align your priorities in terms of what you should be stocking, right? The third point that I spoke about, the pricing and the credit part of it, links back to the information collateral that I spoke about, right? Now, if I have transactions happening in the offline world also going online now, and those information collaterals can then be used to underwrite a credit product for me, that's super useful for that small merchant. So yes, those are pieces of the puzzle that we are trying to solve for initial days. But yes, that's a sort of roadmap for ONDC to exactly solve for the segment of small retailers.
This is very actually interesting because you said there is a place where you could see the open demand and people can make use of it. I think that's a missing piece because even in our journey, when we spoke to a lot of retailers, when we asked this question of how did you decide to start a shop, it's very intuition based, right? But unlike how I could just create like a landing page for e-commerce and put up like a sign up page and see if I have some interest, here I'll have to rent a shop, I'll have to give like advance, and there's a lot of money, and it's not like they are playing with excess capital. That's the capital, right? And one small mistake and it goes down the drain, right? And we have seen that happening. I mean, we also anecdotally collected stories where people said, oh, someone just invested too much in the interiors and it's not a business that can generate that kind of a demand, and they shut it down, right? And these are stories that we keep repeatedly hearing. That the other aspect, extended version, what you said, right? Unlike let's say I again start like a, I don't know, doctor's healthcare app, right? I can't sell grocery, right? Because those are two different businesses. But an offline store is slightly more flexible, where they would say that, hey, I'm selling beauty products. I see a decline in that sort of sale. I'll immediately get like a Xerox shop, like a Xerox machine, and put it in front and say, I'll also do Xerox. So the reasoning being is people will walk in because they see a Xerox machine, and that will give them like the eyeballs to sort of observe what's there, right? So I think the fluidity of what you can add to the store, and it gets evolved, right? What you could add to the store, and so that you keep customers continuously coming in, cash flow continuously coming, is there. If there is a open data like that, like how Namayatri puts it out, right? Similarly, if we could able to do that way even with ONDC, I think that'll be tremendously helpful.
Oh, that's what the roadmap is,
Yeah.
and we should be going live with the open data framework soon on the network. The intent out there is how do we empower the end nodes, right? I think that's the whole objective and the vision of this program, to say how do we move the power back to the end nodes where they can decide what they want to do. They have access to information which helps them self-correct. They have access to information which can help them grow their own businesses, right? And things like uh, what are people in your catchment area buying, right? Or what's not available in your catchment area, which people are looking for, but it's not available. I think once those sort of insights are available, and as Shetty said, it's the fluidity that sort of helps you, innovate when you're not doing so well, can definitely be enabled on a network like ONDC. And I think that's what we're focusing on.
That journey, right? I'm going to bust a lot of myths that we've been hearing in startup circles, right? Another thing that we keep hearing it is, hey, probably they're not interested in adopting technology, right? Every aspect that we're talking about has some or the other technology. We want to dive deep into it. I think there is some truth to it, but there are also some nuance to saying that small businesses don't adopt technology, because everyone whom we spoke to in this had a smartphone. They had like a QR code. They had, in fact, like a CCTV camera. A bunch of them even had like full-fledged computer setup or laptops. It's not for entertainment, because they're doing like a printout shop or like a Xerox thing as a part of this their business, right? So let's dive deep into the digital adoption lens. Will they adopt? Are they open to adopting? If so, is there some personas around it, right? Kani, do you want to sort of dive into the personas of the digital adoption lens?
I'd like to actually add to what Vibhor is saying. In fact, it's it's funny where I'm sitting in this sofa. On one side is Dharmesh, who gets down to that single user and talks to them individually, and we have Vibhor here who thinks at scale, right? Like how do you bring commerce at scale and how do you do this thing? It's goes back to fundamentally businesses are alike, right? Like you have to give the customer what they want.
Yeah.
Whether you're doing it at a 500 square foot or less retail store in Pratapgarh, or whether you're doing it, as a fancy, whatever luxury showroom in BKC, or you're doing it online in Amazon, and therefore a lot of the wisdom, right, of a business and startups, that mantras that we repeat, is a similar learning that I saw when I read the report, right? I just saw that okay, this is a different language for the same underlying idea. And one thing I really, really liked about is that we're dealing with a very large and very vague problem, right? Like, how do you think about your business? How do you think about technology in your business sector? And so one of the things I loved is Dharmesh, is the way that you broke down the problem into phases or life cycles, right? Do you want to sort of talk more about that, and then we can get into it?
Yeah, sure. So we wanted to understand how small businesses work, and we also wanted to understand what is a prelude to that, right? How did you start? So the first set of questions that we asked were primarily about how did you decide to start the business, so which is around business establishment. Then we had a section which was around business operations. On a daily basis, what does your life look like? And what do you do in the shop in the morning? Who are your important stakeholders? Even though from an external, like say as a customer, you go to a kirana store, you see there's only one person, right? But I think he has like this multiple personas internally, because for him, he's the CEO, he's the CMO, COO, whatever you want to call, right? So, but there are other stakeholders who are interacting with him. So, which is your customer, your vendor, your employee. Then you have inventory management. Then you have technology management, technology adoption. Then you have credit, right? So there is a bunch of categories within the operations we try to understand. Then at the end, we also wanted to conclude to say that, what's your aspiration, right? So what does this Kirana store plus mean, right? Or what does your next evolution of your pharmacy mean, right? So that aspiration was also important to capture, because when it goes back to what I initially said, are you seeing this as a goal achievement layer where you said, okay, I now done with A, B, C, I'm done with the business. So it's more of like, this was my goal, I achieved my goal and you're done. Or do you actually have aspirations, right? So if the aspirations exist, what is stopping you from reaching there, right? So this entire report is basically categorized into these three things, and all the insights that you see is further explained within this category, so that when an entrepreneur or an aspiring entrepreneur, an operator who's reading the report, knows exactly where to intervene, right? So, are you looking at building like an inventory management, or are you looking at something at an employee management? It's up to you, right? But this covers insights across all these categories, right?
Vibhor, this thought sort of makes me realize, because I talk to you a lot also often about ONDC, and I know that you'll have businesses like Coca-Cola, Uber comes and signs MOUs, and then at the same time ONDC talks about the long tail, like Dharmesh is talking about, right? An interesting question that at least I have is, what is similar and what is dissimilar on that wide spectrum, right? Between how Coca-Cola thinks about commerce and digital commerce, and how a Kirana store or somebody on a magic pin thinks about commerce, digital commerce. What are the similarities? What are the differences, if you may?
So I think again the scale may vary, right? And I go back to those three pillars that I spoke about. Those three pillars remain the same, right? Everyone is looking for demand. The scales may vary, the aspirations may vary as what the Mindu said, right? But the demand is necessary, right? Second is experience is critical, right? I think the report speaks about the trust value and the entire experience value in terms of, how do you take care of your consumer interest? How do you ensure that the returns, refunds, all those are seamlessly processed? And how small businesses give that a lot of weightage, and so does a Coke or any of the large brands as well, right? So those sort of pillars in terms of inventory management, assortment, pricing, credit lines, all those remain same, right? I think it's about how am I enabling those varies, right? A large business has a lot of tech enablement, and therefore they use a lot of technology to drive that. And small businesses may not be ready yet to do that, right? And therefore, what the focus of the network is to say, how do we provide both of them a level playing platform or a level playing sort of opportunity where both can sort of coexist with the same set of digital rails that are offered to all of us, right? I think that's where the challenge is.
Yeah, no, and I've been thinking about myself also as a consumer of these things, and I feel like, I don't know, it's just getting older or what it is. But earlier, where I would be definitely an avid sort of deal hunter, find the right price, find the right things. These days, I feel like I just value the ability to call up somebody and fix a problem a lot more. Especially as I buy things for the office that we are setting up and the things we are doing, I want a vendor, right? I want an MSME, or I want somebody whom I can call, for whom I'm a reasonable, customer, like reasonable margin on their business or reasonable share of their business, so I get some priority treatment and service, etc., which is one thing I've realized. And as Vibhor was talking about technology, right, I'm thinking about a incident this morning as I was driving here. Is that I'm trying to buy an electric vehicle. I've been thinking about, okay, when the right electric vehicle comes in, I need to shift to EV from ICE. I won't name the brand, the company, or whatever, but you just think about it. It's funny. It's a lot of money, like a car, and EVs are more expensive, right? So talking about something in the range of like whatever, a few, whatever, 10, 15 lakhs at least, right? Like I'm trying to give this company. And for the last 2 days, that has been hindered because an OTP won't deliver. So I can't buy the car till I get this OTP.
Really?
Yeah, and they can't figure out how to give that OTP to me. Right? Like they've tried everything. They keep asking me, do you want to give somebody else's number? I'm like, why would I give somebody else's number for one of the largest purchases I'll make, right? In my spending habit. I'm like, don't you have a way of, somebody's ready to give you money, right? And a lot of money. How can you not take it? Like, how is like, tech enablement, etc. there? So I just find this very interesting, right? Like on one hand, what Vibhor is saying, right? Like at scale, you need to think about processes, you need to think about technology, you need to think about how errors don't happen. Yeah. But these technologies introduce problems of their own, right? Which may be one of the reasons why MSMEs don't adopt technology or find that they're uncomfortable, because, this is me. I'm reasonably technologically literate, and, and when they're telling me some network problem, I'm like, look, boss, billions
No,
of
I think,
SMS.
and Tanuj, if I look at from a value creation perspective, that's what we also focus on when we talk about any value unlock. The question is, why should anyone, either from a demand perspective or from a supply perspective, onboard the ONDC network, right?
Yeah.
The question is, what is the value proposition? Is the value proposition around commercial incentives, which means that am I getting better unit economics because I'm on the network, right? So is there a value addition from a price point perspective that's happening to either the consumer or from a margin perspective to the seller or service provider? Second is there a better assortment available, right? If there is better assortment for the consumer, there is every incentive for the consumer to hook onto the network and start shopping from the network. Third is in terms of the experience. And I think today, all said and done, the consumers have an experience which is unparalleled, right? Whichever category you talk about, whether it's ride hailing, whether it's food delivery, whether it's grocery, the 10-minute grocery or whatever, right? So the point is they are looking for an experience, and therefore whatever the network offers cannot be subpar. It has to be above par, that, right?
Yeah.
Or the fourth could be in terms of any other value addition that is happening, which will help change the behavior, right? And that applies to both end of the network, right? Whether it is the demand side or the supply side. And again, going back to the report as well, right? So for any shopkeeper to really onboard any digital technology, the question is, what is it solving for me? Is it getting me more demand? Is it getting me more access? Is it getting me more efficiency from a pricing perspective, or what is really changing? I think one of the biggest unlocks that we have seen, which people are onboarding the ONDC network, is the access part of it at low cost. Right. Today, the challenge is if I have to be digitally present, I can be on a platform or I can have my own storefronts, but that come at a significant cost. And those again are not universal in nature, which means the audience that I'm catering to is only to the extent of the consumers of that particular platform, right? If I can use one single channel to onboard the network and be universally discoverable across applications set on the network, then it provides a lot of incentive for me from an access perspective, right? Similar thing, right? I'm sure Tanuj must be buying a car, EV of brand A. Now the point is, tomorrow he's going to face a challenge with respect to charging his EV wherever he goes, right?
Yeah.
So can a network of similar nature enable the charging infrastructure of all brands on a single network, using which Tanuj can charge his vehicle, right? So those are clear incentives because of which someone would join the network on a demand side or supply side. And I think therefore the intent out there, and again going back to report, is not to change how you do business, but provide you adequate supporting infrastructure which is digital in nature, which can enhance what you're already doing. So I think that's the sort of difference I would want to bring in.
In fact, no, very good. Exactly what I was getting at, right? Like it's that some systems sound good on paper, but like you said, the reality is it delivering that value proposition to either side of the market? And I feel like you're right that the consumer experience from a demand side, 10-minute grocery, delivery at whatever time in the night, and like anything you want online, next day delivery. These are really good, right? On the supplier side, have we made equivalent leaps, and has that been adopted? Is a big question. Right? And one really surprising insight that from Dharmesh's report that I really, really liked. I'm sorry, Dharmesh. There's a story I remember. I don't know if you'll remember it exactly the same way, but I will. What I remember Dharmesh paraphrasing was, in every store they found definitely a smartphone. Right. Second, a QR code for payments. Right. And exactly what you're saying, Vibhor. A smartphone gets me demand, gets me orders. People can reach me, WhatsApp me, photo, bhejo, do that, deal with my supplier, deal with my creditor, all of that. QR code, obviously we know payment, UPI story, everybody knows. The third thing was very interesting. The third piece of technology that is in every store was the CCTV camera. When I read that, I'm like, actually that's true. Every store I've been to, I've seen a camera, right? But I never thought about it that way. And the interesting story that Dharmesh told me was why. And again, I'm paraphrasing, and Dharmesh, feel free to like add the actual story and who it was. But what I remember him telling me was, for a small business, their entire life's capital is that store.
Yep.
Right? So the CCTV are my eyes and ears on the most important thing in my life, right? So even if I have to go on vacation, like their work-life balance we talk about, there is no work-life balance in a store, right? You're in the store. That's your work and that's your life. So if you have to step away, if you have to go to your village, you have to go for a wedding, you have to do something, that CCTV is what gives you assurance that the store is still running, nothing is going wrong. and your livelihood and your inventory, your working capital of which so much is stuck, is not getting in. So therefore, that technology is adopted way more than I even think about CCTV in my house.
So I think if I reflect back on each of the examples I took, right, it's the value creation that is happening which is driving that adoption, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, rather than superimposing, and I think one of the respondents in the survey that you conducted spoke about a lot of people come and try and sell technology to us, right? And in fact, a lot of people come and sell billing softwares to us, accounting softwares to us. But the question is, at the end of it, what is it solving for me, right? That value creation is critical out there, right? Is it telling me what should I be stocking at the end of the day, right? How do I optimize my inventory? Or it's just telling me a simple, a ledger that's about it, right? So I think wherever you see a value addition coming in terms of solving for any of those three pillars that I spoke about, we are seeing that adoption is much, much higher, right?
Just adding to that point, right? Because imagine if I am a founder who's trying to start like an inventory management or invoice management sort of solution. For me, that becomes the primary product. I'm thinking about like the insights as a afterthought, right? Well, let's create a dashboard. Possibly we could do this also. No, that also is the main product.
Exactly.
Right? Because that is what is going to actually help me get better sales or better management. In fact, if you talk to a lot of these small business owners and talk about their aspiration to establish their own e-commerce, their question back to us is, so what? Does that me having my own e-commerce site drive more sales? The answer is most likely no, right? That is where the access of where ONDC is saying that, I will be present in everybody's most favorite apps, right? Which means he's already gone. It's not like, because it's already like, it's how do we say, it's a push, right? As opposed to e-commerce, it's like a pull, right? Where I have to do a lot more marketing and add on top of that, right? We want to dive to the next section, which is essentially a continuation of what we said, right? Do small business owners adopt technology or not? So there are two schools of thought. We feel there is a slight nuance to it. Yeah, I think Kani will take us through that digital adoption lens in this report.
I think as Dharmesh mentioned, I think it's a spectrum, right? Like, so based on whatever the shops we have talked to, we see like three types of like almost clear personas emerging, which is like active adopters, passive adopters, and sort of like detractors, right? So when you take active adopters, they completely believe in e-commerce and they do their own social media and everything, right? And more often than not, these are the people who are also in the young age range, right? And this sort of calls back to the point we initially established, which is like people who are like less than 35, they want to sort of grow more their business and they are more thinking about like digital in a very active way, right? And something we have also seen is that there are these like second generation of like sons and like daughters of these business owners coming to take over the business, and that time you see the business actually taking a more digital stance also. So one of the wet grinder shops we spoke in Coimbatore, and it was very surprising for us at that point because she has like a social media branding team of her own, and then she's doing like all these reels and everything. It was very surprising for us at that point. She was also someone who was like only 21, so like we could see okay why she's like so believe and like interested in this.
Just adding to that, this social media page that we're talking about does not have any entertainment. It's purely just marketing, where they're just explaining how good their wet grinders are, right? So just the setup of how that shop was. So the dad has been running a brand, like a manufacturing brand. Now when the daughter has come, the dad has carved out like a separate space, put up a different brand, and let her run the show, right? Now she uses social media a lot, where she's even like collaborating with the local celebrities, going to the fairs and collectively doing this. And a bunch of her reels had hit like 1 million views.
Wet
Right.
grinders.
Yeah, wet grinders, right? Purely wet grinders had hit like 1 million views, and he started getting like so many requests, right? And what it has also expanded is she started getting demands which was otherwise unthinkable, like from the northern part of the country, right? And people had to come. So earlier, because the area that we went, it was all full of these manufacturing,
Yeah.
like, outlets, like, you place an order, they'll manufacture you. So earlier, they were just trying to probably steal the customer who's going, potentially could go to the next store, right? Now they're escaping competition and saying, I'm going to a different world. And then I'm trying to market my product there, and they lead. So now when these folks come to that area to purchase, they're asking for the brand. They're not saying, I just want to purchase a wet grinder, right? That's the like, I think the difference. And once, because where it also comes from is, for that particular girl, during COVID, she was trying to do she was trying to be an influencer. She had her own channel. She was trying to do something around makeup and stuff. Then I think she graduated and she had to take a stance around, oh, should I go and work somewhere, or then dad is giving her an opportunity to, you could extend our brand and work. Now I think that's
Get ready with me to get dosa.
something like that,
Yeah.
right? So, but I think that confidence is what pushed her
Yeah.
to do this,
Yeah.
right? Now she had somebody in retainer who would actually, every month you pay them and they'll just send her the reels and they edit and we'll give it back. So that was even a fascinating
Yeah.
story
Wow.
for us.
Actually, 1 million views is even more interesting because Coimbatore is actually a very much like a big area of manufacture of wet grinders. So in that area to get 1 million views, I think for me it's like very amazing. Yeah. So just moving on to the next kind of persona is like this passive adopters, right? I think this probably in my mind would fall under cover most of the retailers, which is basically your sons and daughters helping you to set up like a QR code, have like a WhatsApp, medium of communication and everything. Here also, one of the things which was surprising for us is one of the stationery stores which we went to in Pratapgarh. This guy was like running his own Telegram group, creating a community. In startup things, you say, oh, you should have a community and everything. I was very very surprised by that point. But so mainly all of these is like they're being helped by their family and like family members and friends to sort of move towards the tech and adopting a more digital lens and everything. What primarily sort of is little bit lacking for them is their inability, like a little bit of digital literacy and everything, but then they do have very much the intention to do so, right? And the moving on to the last persona is like detractors. So these are the kind of people, primarily again mostly old people who don't like believe in like the digital technologies. They don't want to do UPI, they don't want to be present in WhatsApp. But then our senses with like all these like either second generation taking up, they are actually, these are the kind of people who are running businesses for the sake of running businesses, right? There is not that aspiration either. So like as and when whatever they decide to do, and if the second generation comes up, we are more hopeful that okay, they will also fall into one of these two buckets rather than like leaving out digital technology as a whole. So yeah.
So just adding to the last point that Kani was talking about, right? The business aspirations doesn't exist. I want to dive into a slightly more nuanced perspective towards that, because everybody says this, but I want to go two steps deeper. One reason is, like I mentioned before, probably the goals were already met, right? Now they have no need to actually put in the 10x effort. The second way to think about it is, if I have to, for the lack of a better word, transform my business, it comes at a huge cost, right? Either I have to change the location of my shop, change the interior of my shop, or I have to like rent out the shop next to me, or I have to procure like a new set of like products and anything.
Working capital.
Yeah, there's a lot of working capital requirement that's there. So it's not just the fear of, oh, I'm not getting access to the working capital. If I fail, whatever is currently running will also go for a toss. And that is not just about the business, because at least now with whatever I have, I'm able to put food on the table and help my kids tuition fee, or help give money to my wife to run the whatever, like home and etc., right? Now if I take this risk and if I fail, I'm not just going back to where I was, I'm going below where I was, right?
So slight different, and in fact, I'll add a third angle to it, right?
Huh.
A lot of times people are not even aware of the potential that exists,
Yeah.
right? Because frankly, there is only that much risk in adopting digital technology. It's not a risk, frankly, right? It's about understanding what's the potential, and therefore should I be investing time and effort into that, right? And I'll give you a few examples of what we have seen in real execution. So we've been working with a lot of self-help groups with the Mandeshi Foundation and a lot of, Kanjivaram sari weavers out there, right? We got them onto the network, right? On the Mandeshi front, they were making achars, papads, and a lot of such products, food products. And then we had the Kanjivaram sari weavers as well. The moment they started getting orders, right, from across India, right, because they were not discoverable across India, and the on-network logistics on ONDC network could enable their products to be shipped across India, they then realized the potential of what their business can do, right? By adopting a simple technology of being on the ONDC network. The moment they saw that potential, then they were like, what more can we do to enhance our sales, right? What more efforts do I need to put from an input perspective as well, in terms of marketing myself, in terms of, getting my presence felt, in terms of better packaging, better inventory management, so I can respond to that need. So I think the third point to me is much larger of saying, do people really realize the potential of the digital rails? And once they're on the digital rails, how big can their business expand to? I think that understanding is also lacking, right? And I think we saw this few examples where, and we're seeing more of those coming in to say, hey, how can you help me grow on the network? Because I've seen initial success, I want to grow further.
Yeah. So this is very interesting because
And I just want to say this, right? Like, I think both Vibhor and I have been referring to the videos. I know the audience will be seeing this podcast and the report come out at the same time. Just to let them know that there are these sort of videos that we made, AI generated videos, where you actually get to hear this sentiment in their own voice. And I think it just hits different. I'd recommend, thank you, Vibhor. I think if you've not yet done it already, I would highly recommend go listen to them in their own voice, telling you how they feel, both the detractors and the active adopters, about how technology has made a difference to their life. I think that, you can read a report, you can read benefits listed as bullet points, but when you hear somebody whose life has changed, like Vibhor is saying, the Kanjipuram silk weavers or of the self-help group foundations, that hearing that emotion is probably going to be a lot more useful for the, hopefully future builders listening to this podcast, that on what it means to build technology that really creates value, that really creates the incentive for you to join.
Great. So we spoke a lot about inventory management, right? And I have a very interesting story. Me and Tanuj have shared a lot of stories. This is one of my favorites, right? So we went to this footwear store owner in Tirupur. And this man, a couple of years back, probably 4-5 years back, had 3 shutters and he had a flourishing business. Okay. When we went, he had converted one of the shutter into a tea stall where he was selling, cigarettes, teas, whatever, like some namkeen and stuff like that. And there was only one shutter where he had some footwear. The other shutter was mostly like a abandoned godown types. And we went and met him at a very important phase, probably in his life, where he was deciding to wrap up the footwear business and he wanted to start like an ice cream parlor. And this man has been doing this business for the last 17 years. Right? At one point, he had like multiple stores and stuff. Now, we had a huge conversation, and there was one point where we were trying to really understand what went wrong. There were 2 things. So Tirupur has largely been like apparel manufacturers and stuff. And that business was not doing well. And so there were not migrants, they were not there. So that didn't work out. But the second important aspects that he said was around customer preferences, right? He said earlier, a few years back, when somebody came to my store, they just wanted a slipper or a shoe. Now, when you come with such a vague requirement, I'm able to convince with whatever inventory that I have. I can tell you like, oh, this looks good. This is better for your foot. I have a bunch of brands. I'm sure I was confident enough to actually convince the customer to sell something. Now, what has happened in the last few years is that when customers walk in, they already have a brand in mind. They already have a shoe in mind. They already probably are having even a color in mind. And they don't explicitly tell you in the first go. They first see that, you show me this, and then they ask you for more. And then if you don't have it, they come with a reference, which is essentially something that they have seen in one of the marketplaces or on Instagram, right? So earlier that reference did not exist. So he was able to sort of cater to that need. Now he say that now because they have a specific thing in mind, I'm not able to cater that because I don't have unlimited shelf space. And my shelf space is very much limited. Unlike an e-commerce where it has unlimited shelf space, I feel like the customers have already gotten used to that. And now it's very difficult for me to, what do you say, like, satisfy them. And over a period of time, the business just goes down, right? At a point to say that, they've actually given up on saying, well, let me move to a different. Now, here also, he's trying to establish an ice cream parlor, not because he's going to make a lot of profit. The man that we met was around like mid 50s, right? He said, I just want a cash flow business, right? He also said this very interesting statement. I need a minimum of 30,000 revenue from the store. If it goes to somewhere 25,000, I am better off actually working somewhere. Why should I run the store? Right. So that max was very interesting for us because he had a specific number to say that, only if I 30,000 and any additional aspect, I can have like one helper person who can give him the salary or whatever. Right. So this is the mental model, and inventory plays a huge role in terms of how I position the business, whom I cater to, how my business looks like. The second aspect of it, let's assume that this store owner has enough aspiration, like has a long journey to do. The second problem would be is what do I do with the dead inventory, right? Either I have to write it off, take the losses in my books, or I'll have to figure out saying I have to first sell this off, buy new inventory and stuff like that, which goes back to your thing where you said, I don't know if it'll sell, right? I don't know if that new way of doing business is something that I can adopt. The confidence doesn't sort of exist, right? So inventory management is also a place where they struggle with and where we believe that the AI intervention could actually help, right? Tanuj or Vibhor or Kani, you guys have seen anything around inventory management? Would love to learn your thoughts.
Fair. I think so. There are three problem statements that you spoke about, right? One is the assortment, right? And I think you're right that I only have that much shelf space, and therefore, how do I enable a larger assortment, right? And I think that's where the digital cataloging really comes to play, right? And something that can be enabled on a network like ONDC again. The fact is that you might stock certain products only, but can you still showcase a larger assortment available to you, which you can procure on demand, right, for your consumers, right? And I really sort of like the example that you took in terms of the footwear sort of a use case. Now, there are so many SKUs in terms of colors, sizes, that you cannot be stocking everything with you, right? And therefore, can you have a mechanism where you showcase the universe of assortment that's there? You might not stock everything, but you have a backend engine where you can, on the fly, also place a back-to-back order onto the supplier for a particular color or size, should there be a demand for a particular product. I think that's one clear use case that can be solved for using digital catalogs, right? A linked part also is the inventory management, right? Obviously, with so many SKUs, especially in the footwear segment, right? Which you've taken as an example, where the trends change very fast, right? How do I do that? That also leads to the dead inventory sort of a use case, right? The question is, today, if I have some dead inventory with me, I'm confined to the catchment area of physical walk-ins that I have. Even if I run some schemes or offers on that, it's only confined to the walk-ins that I have, right? Can I expose that inventory to a larger audience, not just in the catchment area, but across the country, where I can ship those products at a lesser price, still recovering my investment that have gone into the inventory, right? So I think there are clear benefits that come in with such a use case, right? And I think we're seeing those benefits already on the network, where people are able to ship across the country and not just confined to their local catchment, right? And a lot of D2C brands, a lot of self-help groups that we're seeing are seeing now orders. In fact, one statistic I would want to share is today, as we stand on the ONDC network, there are orders that are coming from 600 cities/towns across the country in the retail segment, right? Which means tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities where you have demand getting aggregated that's coming onto the network. So that sort of channels do open up for you on a network like ONDC, where you get more universal access And therefore, your issues around inventory management, issues around dead inventory can well get taken care of, with such technologies that exist today.
That's a very interesting point, isn't it? That I think we, maybe even in this conversation, we've made that online offline distinction very rigid. But what Vibhor is saying is that there might be,
It's phygital.
it's phygital, right? Like
It's phygital.
It's that there are certain areas or concepts or problems where the digital makes so much sense. Again, one of the examples that we discussed during the making of this report is that so I get, when I go back to Bombay, my mom is a dentist, so she has a shop, so all the other shopkeepers in the area look at her as shopkeeper, right? Like she's MSME retail kind of business, except the business is your teeth, right? So, but what I get therefore is VIP service in most stores, right? If I need something and I go to any store, kind of what Vibhor is saying at a hyper local level happens is that I can go to the chemist and ask him for something like a something grocery or something as well. And the chemist, because he knows it's my mom's thing, he'll be like, wait, I'll call the guy.
Yeah.
I'll get you that inventory. I'll get it to you here.
Yeah.
You stay here.
Yeah.
Right? You sit in my AC shop and all that. So like you get that VIP treatment, which is basically what you're saying. Because informally, they also have their network.
Yeah.
And they have their network which is built around credit relationships, around, general favors, everybody's neighbors. But also like money and these other relationships that we don't see in the back end, which happen. One thing that, like I was saying, one of our conversations that really struck with me, right, is this idea of sort of this seller who had this sari, right? Saris that he couldn't
Sell it off.
sell it off, right? Like it was, he now finally gave up and said this is dead inventory. And now, I think it's one of the video interviews also. I think this is a clip, so people can go see it. He says that, look, I had an option. I could go give it to this wholesaler or whatever who gives me a certain price.
Yeah.
And I would have made, like, let's say I made back 80% of the money I spent. But instead, he ended up selling it to his customers at a 50% or 60% of what he would have made. So he gave up money on the table, right? Because he thought it was much more important to build that relationship with the customers, to be top of mind, etc. This is deep discounting, say, an end of reason sale, whatever you want to call it, right? Like it is the same idea, and therefore, inventory is actually a very hard, complex problem.
Yeah.
If you had data, this is what we're saying. This is one of those areas where even a physical shop that says, look, demand is not the, going back to Vibhor's framework, demand is not necessarily the thing that I am primarily looking for from e-commerce.
Yeah.
But if I had digital inventory, digital catalog, and then that could tell me insights on what to buy, what to not buy, what to keep, what to not keep, what ONDC is seeing as a growing trend, just that part of the business also, if we could help people with, if somebody could build something around, more than the invoice system for doing billing or whatever other apps we see, actually solving a very hard, complex, cognitively demanding problem could be, a thing. One of the conversations I remember having with Vibhor, in fact, and other folks from ONDC, in fact, with Koshi, I think I remember suggesting this to him. This was well before when McKinsey was doing that report with you guys. And even with the McKinsey partners, I remember having this conversation telling them, you keep thinking of e-commerce as starting on a cell phone and ending in a box in your house, right? Digital commerce, if you have to do like digital transactions, it could also be that you go into the store, right? But there is certain part of that transaction that I complete digitally, or certain thing or a certain element of it, right? Like I take 3 things, but there's an accessory or something that I need to get, and I place the remaining thing order on an app because it comes from the supplier, right? But the main thing I came for, that I got, right? So I got a dress or I got something with the shoes but some accessory, something is later, I'm getting it later, right? Or I'm buying a scooter, but I need certain accessories and they'll come later. Something of that sort is also digital and e-commerce and has sort of elements that I would encourage people to start thinking about, right? Because there are needs for which even I today, like I said, want to go to a store, want to talk to a store, want a service level. But with them, I have resolved a query about what to buy or how to go about it or what is my actual requirement. I've clarified that thought. And then I'm willing to complete that journey on digital. Right? What I wanted was that service. So there are so many ways of looking at retail once you stop thinking online, offline, right? Once you start thinking continuum, start thinking that various parts of the problem can be digitized in different ways. And again, lots of interesting solutions there. But then
I want to just add one point to that, right? When you go offline, there's a lot of serendipity to it. So in fact, in Tirupur, the same sari store that you were talking about, while we were interviewing, a customer came in, and I think she was a boutique store owner or someone, and he had a lot of accessories like this buttons and whatever to do that. She comes, she looks at the all the the shelves, and that's when she's getting the ideas, right? Oh, maybe I can add this, maybe I can add this. Then she's asking, I'm thinking of something like this, what do you think you can help me with, right? So this would be very difficult, because in e-commerce you're directly going to the search box and the e-commerce is expecting you to know what you want. But in majority cases, that is not the way how it works, right? They say that this customer, probably our observation was, inspire me, right? And so that I'm here to just bring the best out of it. So in my opinion, in that store, her excitement and this guy's smartness is where the business was happening, right?
Yeah.
And at that, probably pure digital might not work, but something, a combination of physical plus digital would beautifully work.
yeah. In fact, think about, sorry, Kani.
Yeah. I just want to draw on one of the points you mentioned, right? And it's deeply interlinked with like trust also in a way. Even some of the stores we went to, like customers do ask for certain products, and the store owner, like he's essentially doing Amazon as a service, right? He just like orders it and gets it. But one of the things he was facing was also the fact that he doesn't know when is it arriving. By that time, the customer sort of goes and gets it, right? So if some aspects of these can be solved, and essentially he's actually also incurring a loss, because it's like it's time inefficient and everything. But then he's doing it just to maintain the trust, that like goodwill with the customer. So there are like interesting pieces of all of which is like interlinked, and if it could be solved in a like a better way, it would be great. Yeah.
No customer should go out of my shop empty-handed is their phrase.
Yeah.
Right? So whether I make profit, loss, it's okay, it's fine. That flexibility exists. If a customer walks out of my store empty-handed, I think that hits them personally. Like, they kind of feel it as a failure.
Yeah. No, I find that experience happening to me personally as well, right? Like there's so many now people, when I'm setting up the office, so many vendors I've started to rely on, where it's this plus the idea of like, I have to ask them for a bill and an invoice and this thing. Right? Like, they offer credit not because I asked for it.
It's the way of doing
Because
it.
the ways of doing this is a relationship, right? Like they're like, boss, you take it and go. You need a whiteboard, you need marker. Okay, let me send a guy, get it to you fast. I'm like, okay, how do I pay? Like we'll settle, do it, right? And 3 days later, 4 days later, sometimes I'll remember, sometimes they'll send a bill or whatever, right? So yeah, it's that relationship thing. Honestly, it works. There's a reason why they invest in that, because I mean, ultimately, if you can start, like if I have a problem now, my first port of call is say Hitesh for stationery items, not Amazon, right? I'm not going and searching and doing. I'm saying Hitesh, this is my problem. Can you send something? And that's it, right? So I think if we, even for the digital folks, I would think this is an aspiration.
Yeah. And I think what becomes critical, Tanuj, is do you really know who your customer is, right? A lot of times what we have seen in the platform world, right? The seller or the service provider does not even know who the consumer is or who the customer is, right? Because the concentration of the data happens at the platform, right? And one of the very conscious programs that we're working on is to say, how do we move that information back to the end nodes of the network where the seller exactly knows who the consumer is. So at the end of the day, physical or digital transaction, it's a transaction between the buyer and the seller. The platforms in between are only the agents acting on each other's behalf, right? But the transaction is between a consumer and a seller. And therefore, they should know who my customer is, right? And that's what we're focusing on. I think one of the benefits, the real benefits of ONDC as a network is that information is now available to the end node to really do, customer engagement, follow-up customer engagement with their consumers. And that really empowers the sellers, right? Yeah. I think that's a big aspect, because traditionally what we have seen, not just in India, but globally as well, there's a lot of concerns around the concentration of that data or information at the platforms, right? When that moves back to the end nodes, they can do a lot of new things in terms of customer engagement, which is now possible on the network. I think that's an important aspect to look into.
There's one of the videos, Dharmesh, and I think this is great segue, I think, into what we want to talk about, is that the Mintra one. I mean, if you can tell if I it's in Tamil, I can't even paraphrase it. If you
Okay.
don't mind.
So we actually interviewed one sari store owner in Tirupur, right? Now, this person had listed their inventory online with multiple platforms, right? To realize that, they at one point he was consistently selling 20 items online every day, right? And he would get some return. It's the same story we spoke about, live for some time before he realizes this doesn't work out. I think the breaking point comes where once he had sold 2 saris, right, to a customer, and the customer had returned the 2 saris. But the twist in the tale is they return only half of each sari, right? And that's, I think, the point which hit his nerve and said, I'm not going to do this, right? One thing is around, okay, if there is a fault of mine, if there is some damage, they accept. This is purely a mistake from the customers, and let's just say they fraud, right? So now his point is, in offline world, he's been built relationship and business only through relationship, like how he said. Now in the online world, if a marketplace are not even allowing him to contact and listen to their side of the story, right, they feel a little handicapped. So to put it in simple, they feel that the offline way of how they deal businesses is very different from the online world, right? And that's where I think he stopped. He stopped saying, he doesn't want to do that. But then he asked this question, important question, right? Where he said, when a customer walks into the store, they know my face, they know my name, or they know my store name, where it's located. I'm building some trust. I'm building some brand. But when you're going to these marketplaces and you're searching, whose customer are you? You're not my customer. I am the one who is listing the product. I am the one who is giving the discount. But who gets the name at the end of the day? It's the marketplace, right? Now, I'm not even owning the customer. I'm not even getting this opportunity to even talk to the customer to resolve any of these disputes. Then who am I? I feel used, right? At that point in time, right? So that is one, we could say that, maybe this is one-off case. There are more. The thing is, everybody's going through the same journey, like how Vibhor also mentioned, right? It looks very, it's like Bollywood, right? It looks very fancy outside. You enter in, you realize, you need to play a different game. There's only 1% of them winning. The rest of them, there is aspiration, or they give up and they move to something else. That's what is happening, right?
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things that you look at, right? What has happened in this migration? I think that goes back to the initial point that we're all discussing in terms of, are you asking me to change my business model completely, or are you supporting me in sort of assisting me what I'm doing? In the erstwhile physical world, I control the terms of trade.
Correct.
As a physical shopkeeper. The moment I move to the digital world, and digital world is equivalent to platforms for this discussion, those terms of trade were being mandated by the platforms.
Okay.
I lost complete control of those terms of trade, right? And it was almost like saying it's my way or highway, right? So either you adhere to the rules of the game that the intermediary decides, or you can't sort of transact on that platform. If you can, in the digital world as well, move that power back of the terms of trade to the end nodes, where the seller says, hey, these are my terms. If you're acceptable, hey, consumer, please buy from me. If you're not acceptable, that's perfectly fine, right? And the consumer also is aware in terms of what the terms of the trade are, and they mutually agree into accepting those terms and do it. That's a much more meaningful way of dealing with it, right? What we're trying to do on the network is to ensure that we can replicate this power of negotiation on both the sides on a digital rail as well, which means the seller can propose what the terms of trade are. The consumer has the chance to accept or reject those terms of trade and accordingly enter or not enter into a transaction. Once that power equation shifts back to the end nodes, a lot of these things get taken care of, right? So in terms of, I left, I'm being left in a surprise in terms of half sarees arriving to me. How do I react to it? Do I hold back the money? Do I refund the money? Now, all those are terms that you've entered into with the consumer, and therefore you can act on it accordingly, right? So yeah, I think those are sort of things which we need to really look at when looking at digital rails or digital technologies. They should assist me rather than completely disrupting the way I'm doing business.
Yeah, this is a good point. I also want to bring in a certain nuance to this example, what Dharmesh was referring, right? So the person who brought this like Tirupur sari guy to the Amazon to the platform is different than the person who he is in connection with for the customer support, right? So this
The
seller guy,
agent on
exactly,
the
right? This seller guy is not even given a chance to talk to the customer straight away to sort of that power of negotiation you're talking about, right? Like to hash it out between the two of them, it's not happening.
True.
Right? Like, so I think that's one of the bigger reasons for ONDC also.
Yeah, it's like like fighting with your bank, right? Your bank is too big; they don't care.
Yeah.
Your account is too small.
Yeah.
They're not going to change whatever I say.
But by the way, like this own terms make commerce happens on WhatsApp,
Yep.
right? So a lot of times, like they have their own communities, they have their top customers in a WhatsApp group. If I get like new procurement, new inventory, that's the place where the first photographs go, right? I got new shirts, new saris, and whatever. That's the place where it goes, right? And people already know what's the terms of trades are, right? And because it's so informal, he's not even explicitly saying that I won't accept returns or stuff, because the customers are confident enough to say that if there is some mistake, I'll give it and he will take it, right? So sometimes the relationship itself is very, the terms are not explicit, very implicit, and they're okay with it, because if I already know Tanuj, a lot of things become very flexible between us, right? I don't have to explicitly, oh, you have to pay me back. That doesn't exist unless you bring in like a digital platform and I'm talking to a stranger. Then the terms are required. I think there's a beauty in this chaos also.
Yeah, no, I think trust and somewhere there's that relationship between scale, trust, and friction, right? Most of the time, to scale, you have to have high trust. So systems like UPI or something else will help. Okay, money will move. But sort of in this low digital, low sort of tech economies, what you end up doing is that you put a lot of that on the trust, right? Like, and I also feel like in at scale, therefore, when you're dealing with, you have the option between millions of sellers, you have to solve trust in a brand new way, right? ONDC has to now think about systems of rating, reviews, etc. In a way that, especially in a generative AI world, I'll be the first to admit now, every proxy you had of trust, which is if somebody has left a nice long review mentioning this feature, mentioning this, putting photo. Even if you had to buy fake reviews earlier, you couldn't buy those quality of reviews. Today, anybody can generate with one. I can tell ChatGPT generate 500 reviews.
Read
One
these reviews
prompt.
and say that to me.
Around this, I'll say here are 10 features, here are 10 things, here are 1 or 2 bad things. Now make 500 combinations of this, right? Use 3, 4, whatever, and it'll just do it. And you put that in, and we're going to live in a world where you don't know, right? At scale, how do you do this? So that's a scary thought. What if then people will go back to like, hey, like, at least I have a person or a human at the end of the day that I can go hold accountable for this. So there are these various challenges at every end of the spectrum, and that you have to figure out, how to solve. And again, I feel like these are, we are at the frontier. I think at least for me, I'm 34, 35 now. Sort of, I've seen this with the internet also, right? Like we're at the frontier of like, there were so many things that people have promised. Oh, you will have, everybody will talk to each other. But then you got like chaos, right? Like, and then we had to go to like different systems where closed groups, closed messaging, etc., so that you could start talking to each other. There is so much to build, right? And even when you like ONDC, etc., is the idea that okay, digital is so much better in so many ways. Inventory management, digital catalog, a seamless thing, and while that is still being built, something like generative AI comes in and changes the equation on essentially, like say, like I was saying just now, reviews or trust, or how do you know what is good, what is worth buying, etc. So in this sort of landscape of constant evolution, and again, the generative images, generative music, videos that we're seeing right now, even though I know that this is coming, or that version 4 was like this, 5 is like this, 6 is like this, it still blows my mind, right? So in that sort of change and like deluge of change that is going to keep coming in the next sort of few years, I actually had a question for the both of you, right? And I want to ask you, Kani, first, if you can. Is that you were there, you were actually there talking to the shopkeepers, listening to their pain, listening to their emotions. I mean, for the people listening, right? What would be your that one idea, that one thing that you really think should be built?
So in most of the shops we saw was most of them didn't have an employee. They didn't have an employee just because they didn't think that they had the funds to employ someone, right? So in my mind, what came as a solution was if you could have like a AI digital clone of the shopkeeper who can address the customers, right, in their own native language, in their own tonality and everything, so that when the customers come in, like they can ask them questions and everything. I think that is something as an idea I believe would be like very helpful, in the event that they are not able to hire someone, or this particular solution can be thought of for multiple things, but like I think that was something which I had in mind.
And that's because you believe that the capacity, like because a shopkeeper, like Dharmesh was saying earlier, is CEO, CMO, like
Yeah.
CXO of their own business. Is that, do you see as that as a capacity freeing thing? Or because I mean, interacting with the customer seems to be the primary thing, right? So like which
Yeah, I would definitely talk about in a very capacity freeing thing only, right? One of the, if I have to take a little macro lens, one of the things we have also saw is that like they are not able to think ahead because they are bogged down by the day-to-day operations, right? So if that time is freed somewhere to strategically think for the future and then like do something more, I think that would be a great thing. Yeah.
That can even be your digital strategy, right? You don't have to come to the store to ask a couple of things to know if that stuff exists or not. They could just, go to their storefront. Instead of there's a e-commerce website, you just have the store owner there asking that, what do you want? And then because of they might have the data around what exists in the store and stuff, they could see and take the conversation forward from there.
I same question to you, Dharmesh. Like I mean, that's an interesting one. I actually want to build on something that because I've been talking to a lot of AI startups and what they're building, and what is happening, what are they most promised about. Something very similar, right? Kani, what you just said. I'll come back to it in a moment. But first, Dharmesh, like what is your sort of big thing that you took away as and really struck you as, okay, if I wish somebody had made this to help the MSMEs.
For me, the inventory and procurement seem to be the most exciting part, because now people are coming up with requirements which the shop owners might have not even seen before, because they're coming up with requirements, something that they see on these Chinese products that they see the videos, right? And they would come and show you that, hey, I need this. It could be like a very fancy vegetable chopper. He might not even know where to get it, right? But now, even that, you can't even go and describe it to your vendor, right? What will you describe? At the max, you could just take the photograph and show it. But what if we had an app, the shopkeeper had an app or a technology where you could take the photograph and the photograph will understand what the product is. And then it's able to show the list of vendors from where he could procure and promise them saying, if not now, I can procure it in 2 days, right? That ability or the power to give them is something that will be very interesting. Even if he's not able to procure, at least by just taking these photographs, he will know what kind of products is in your vicinity they're interested in.
Yeah.
Then we can actually go back to saying that maybe you should try and keep like more cooking stuff or more toys that is of this particular style, which is from this particular country, and all of that aspects you can bring in. Today, it is like somebody comes and he says no, and that important piece of information is just gone. Trade didn't happen, information is not documented, then it goes back to ground zero again, right? That aspect is something I think AI can beautifully solve. It's actually not even like you need so much compute power also, right? It's such a simple application, but it'll solve so many things for them.
In fact, I think this is, you've said this, it's not come out in our conversation today. You've said this, it's in the report. Vibhor and ONDC team, I know they talk about this, that I'm just going to try and merge these ideas together, is that commerce is not just B2C. It's not that last transaction that happens. There's a supply chain and a set of the same relationship that I've been talking about with vendors. Those vendors have with their suppliers. And you've covered the supplier sort of part of the equation in the report. and the trust between them, credit relationships, and also like how those evolve and how those change, and how suppliers help sometimes the shopkeepers learn how to do business, what's selling, what's not selling. So there's information, credit, a lot of things flowing in that supply chain. And I know that that's why ONDC is also looking at sort of the whole B2B chain, right? Because that you can't just say that I'll digitize that endpoint, because without a digital backbone,
Yep.
it doesn't flow. So what Dharmesh you're talking about is also another advantage of the open data framework that Vibhor was saying. That I think one of the the big marketplaces, one of the biggest advantages they have is that, or this is I guess what you call network effects. The idea that even if they shared freely all the data of every transaction that a shopkeeper had, right? So I would get to know what is happening or who's coming to my store and sharing that. I have that data. You have for your store, she has for her store. But there is a whole set of transactions, and we don't even know how deep this is, of people who come, search, see all our inventory, but don't even buy. That data is gold, right? Because imagine if you're the person who discovered fidget spinners back in the day, and you were the first one to list it, right? And then it becomes viral. Okay, your shop might go great, but because the search, everybody's searching fidget data, whoever had access to that search data could then completely wipe you off, because everybody's procuring from the same supplier, right? But if you had that ability to forecast that demand and bring it forward, right? And that power for a long time had been retained with the platform, and everything derived from that, what to stock, what inventory, etc., has been kept with the platforms. So one of the reasons I'm very excited that you take your idea, what you're saying, and combine it with what ONDC is doing, right? It can be very powerful. Vibhor, I know that you all have a different lens altogether, but what's your sort of in this AI world or in this sort of change that's coming? What excites you as a business to be built?
No, I think we spoke about the real problems that the retailers are facing, right? So one thing is digital is not an option. It has to be there, right? So I think one thing that most companies or most merchants should look at is explore joining the ONDC network. I think that's a starting point for me, right? I think is to take a larger view to say what should the businesses focus on, right? What sort of problems can they solve for? I think we discussed problems around cataloging as an example, inventory management as a certain example. There are enough and more opportunities out there, right? Especially looking at Indic language support, right? Speech to text and text to speech sort of use cases, right? How do we bring those sort of use cases to life? Because the moment you're talking about small merchants in remote areas, right? How can we leverage voice for their enhancement, right? Whether it is inventory management, whether it is stock, management, whether it is assortment management, how can we enable voice for them? To me, that's a big unlock, Tanuj, right? Local language and voice is the way forward. And if you're building technologies around those to help the small retailers, I think that's going to be a big plus for me.
I think one of my, I'll switch ideas. I have plenty. I'll switch to some of the things that I'm starting to see that are really interesting. I think one of them is this sort of combining a lot of what you're saying is this idea of a digital shopkeeper or an assistant. Let's think about some, the big purchases in life that people have, like an AC. This summer in Bangalore, at least everybody has bought an AC. There is a question to be asked there. What AC do I need? What's the difference between 3-star, 4-star, 5-star? Like there's so much complexities and cognitive load. But if I had to actually had the time and patience, if I was not in a busy chroma or doing whatever, how I would ask this is like, okay, what's the size of your room? Like 8 feet by 10 feet. Let's take an approximation, right? Like, can you fit one large bed in there? Can you fit 2 large beds in there? Right? You can approximate the room size. You can ask how tall, whatever. Do you get sunlight? Are you on the top floor? Ask some basic questions. I can size your AC for you. And then the question becomes, should I buy this model, that model? That becomes, okay, 3-star model. How many months will you use the AC? You're in Bangalore? Okay, you'll use it in April, May, June, or whatever. Feb, March, or March, April, May. 3 months a year, 8 hours a day. This is your electricity bill on a 3-star. This is your electricity bill on a 4-star. Right? That changes the way that I interact and I find this, right? Because today I find a lot of sales happen on some features, right? Like I spoke about buying a car. They're telling me things. I'm like, how do I care? Right? Why do I care? And that idea of personalizing that conversation, right, between the shopper and the buyer and getting deeper into what they want. I think AI is incredibly good at that. And In India, the thing that excites me is that the infrastructure we've laid out, the DPI we've laid out, gives you such a good starting point. We are talking to a company, I won't name them, big company, who is going to be doing this, that every shop already has a UPI QR code. That's a unique ID for the shop. From that unique ID, you can figure out, come to a unique catalog, whether by ONDC or otherwise. Right? So you know what they have. The information for those products is on the internet. You can make an AI assistant today that builds this AC comparison bot. So I just scan the QR code. Even if I don't speak the language, I go to a shop here and I don't speak Kannada, I can scan their QR code and I can start talking to the shop. Right? So you don't even have to put the feet on street to go install those QR codes or go onboard the shops anymore. You can do it today. Right? And this is why we're excited, and the report that we've put out there is because the opportunity space just keeps evolving. And as a country, we're really getting there, right? We're getting into that $10 trillion economy by 20 whatever. Like, each number, each higher you go, 2047, it's higher. But to get there, we're going to get there by taking all of these businesses along.
Yeah.
It's not going to be without them.
Yeah, for sure.
So I am just excited, and I hope that we're running out of time. So I'm just want to say this, that I'm excited for all the things that are left to be built. And with AI, how easier has it become to build them? And because of our DPIs and open networks, right, that if you do build the right thing, it will scale, right? So I hope that all of you will take this opportunity to build something that really makes India sort of achieve its potential. And if you are building such a thing, please come talk to us. We'd love to help you. We'd love to put you in front of the right people and help you model this solution for people plus AI. That's it from my end. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this was a great conversation. Thank you, folks. Thanks for being patient. And like Tanuj said, please read the report and give us your feedback. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vibhor. Thank you for joining us.